Greetings, everybody. I'm Kasisi Harris, and today we're here to talk about Lady Mechanika Volume 1. Lady Mechanika was brought to life by the writer and artist Joe Benitez, and you may recognize some of Joe's work with DC titles such as Batman, Superman, Titans. He worked on titles such as The Darkness and Magdalena for Image Comics, and for Aspen Comics he worked on Soulfire. The coloring for Lady Mechanika was done by Josh Steigerwald, and the lettering was done by Josh Reed. Joe also mentions a number of assists in terms of writing and artistry. M. Chen is mentioned as helping with writing. Martin Montiel and Mike Garcia are both mentioned as well. Lady Mechanika is a graphic novel, and it's about 160 pages. The first volume is revolving around Lady Mechanika uncovering the mystery of her origins, and to do this, she involves herself with any half-human, half-mechanical hybrid corpses that are in the area. They don't have to be corpses, they could be the actual beings that she hunts, whether good or bad. What she's looking for is to understand who created them, and by doing that, she can understand who created her. So let's talk about the acts in Volume 1. Act 1, which runs from page 1 to about page 48. If we think in terms of chapters, this book is also written in chapters. It's chapter 1 and halfway through chapter 2. And in it, we're introduced again to the protagonist, who is Lady Mechanika, and the antagonist, who are Nathaniel Blackpool, who is the head of Blackpool Armaments, and Katrina Winters, who is in an organization all her own, but she's helping Nathaniel Blackpool in this instance. We're also in this backdrop of Mechanicon, which is a huge convention that is unveiling all these inventions that help mankind. And Nathaniel Blackpool is funding this convention. And so a corpse is found that is half human, half Mechanika, and it looks very much like Lady Mechanika. She wants to find out the origins of this corpse, obviously, so that she can determine who she is. Nathaniel Blackpool is involved because he wants the blood from this corpse. We are also introduced to a mysterious character in Act 1 known as Cain. And Cain is way overpowered, apparently. And we don't know whether he's on the protagonist side or the antagonist side at the end of Act 1, which brings us to Act 2. And so in Act 2, it runs from about page 49 all the way to about page 142. And again, if we think in terms of chapters, that's from the halfway point in chapter 2 all the way through chapter 4. And we learn a lot. The corpse is actually named Serafina, and she's the daughter of a knife thrower from the local circus, Cirque de Romani. And her family has this special blood that is said to be descended from either angels or demons, depending on your perspective. Nathaniel Blackpool wants that blood again because it will aid in the human body accepting mechanical parts or mechanical upgrades. Obviously, her father wants her back because he wants his daughter. And Lady Mechanika wants to find her simply because she wants to find her origins. So she is aiding the father, who is named Mr. Gaetano, in finding the daughter. So again, they're in this backdrop of Mechanicon. Nathaniel Blackpool unveils his masterful invention, which is the Helios Arx, which is a huge airship. And on that airship, of course, only the rich can get on it by invitation. But that's also where he's keeping the corpse of Serafina and her lover, Angelo, who didn't want her to go alone. And we learned the story of how Angelo and Serafina ran away from their Cirque de Romani in Act 2 as well, but I won't get into all that. Needless to say, by the end of Act 2, the hero, Lady Mechanika, and her companions are aboard the Helios Arx. They find Angelo, who is now a half-human, half-machine killer. They best him, but with his dying breath, he ends up stabbing the, surprise, she's alive, Serafina. And now she's dead because her lover stabbed her at the last moment. And in walks Katrina Winters, the antagonist, who is seemingly overpowering the hero at this moment when all hope seems lost. And now we enter Act 3, which is about page 143 all the way through 160, or in other words, it's chapter 5. And so in enters Cain, who bests Katrina. He completely decimates her. And he says he can bring Seraphina back to life, but she won't be the same when she's brought back. Sort of that Stephen King Pet Sematary rule of bringing something back from the dead. And so he brings her back. She actually gets a cool pair of wings. I mean, Seraphina, wings, go figure. But she doesn't remember her father, and we see her father having to come to terms with that. So let's talk about character arcs. So we don't see very many in this book, but we do see some. So again, Seraphina, as I almost mentioned, Seraphina's father has to deal with the fact that his daughter that he's been looking for, she's brought back to life, but she won't be the same as he remembers her. And he has to learn to deal with that. Lady Mechanika also goes through a little arc in terms of her companion, Lewis. She thinks he's a good for nothing. She always kind of totes him around, but she thinks that, you know, he's a drag until she realizes that he's always there when she needs him. He's always rescuing her when she's in tight spots. So she kind of learns to love him a bit more by the end of it. But we see that this is just the beginning of Lady Mechanika's arcs. And I think there's 6 volumes so far. So over the course of those volumes, we'll see bigger arcs in her character, hopefully. But in this volume 1, we don't see a huge change. She's still looking for her origin. She doesn't have any different view of humanity or her perspective on humanity. She's just still working to find those answers. So the artwork is really beautiful in this, and we can talk about transitions. And so some of the transitions used from a McLeod perspective, action to action is definitely used in this comic or graphic novel. Specifically in the fight sequences, we can see when Lady Mechanika fights Mr. Gaetano when they meet for the first time, the way he uses a knife, his movements, her blocking those movements, it's an action to action transition throughout that whole sequence on those pages. And we can also see subject to subject transitions used as well. And again, when Lady Mechanika encounters the circus and she's hearing the story of how Seraphina ran away from the circus, as revealed by Seraphina's sister, we see subject to subject transition, as in we see Seraphina's sister talking, and then we see a billboard of Seraphina and Angelo as trapeze artists, and we see the group again. So these shots aren't action to action, but they all involve the subject. And so we can see that demonstrated as well. Another great aspect of transition that may not necessarily align with McLeod's perspective is how Joe Benitez transitions from one chapter to the next. He almost always ends on a splash with a splash page, which is beautiful and it's engaging and it causes you to want to turn to the next chapter. But then he also begins that chapter in a more traditional way. The panels in this graphic novel are beautiful. They're not really traditional in the sense that they don't flow as nice rectangles. They're awkward shapes, and often you see just the character's profile in the middle of those panels. And so while your eyes are still moving in that backward Z function, you have this beautiful set of panels that are arrayed for you to follow. But again, once he transitions from one chapter to the next, that starting page is usually more aligned to a traditional backwards Z flow and panel structure. And then he starts getting more and more intricate as he goes. And I really appreciated that. In terms of recommending this graphic novel, I do. If you're a lover of steampunk, if you know anything about steampunk or you don't, this is a good example of steampunk. Also, if you like characters with strong female leads and strong female antagonists, this is a great book as well, Volume 1. I haven't read the rest of the volumes to see if that still flows throughout, but at least for Volume 1, we can see Lady Mechanika as the strong protagonist, and Catherine Winters is actually a strong antagonist. And I really like their interaction. It's much like Beatrix Kiddo and Ellie Driver in Kill Bill Volume 1. The way they banter back and forth is almost exactly the same. Even Katrina Winter's eye patch really reminds you of Daryl Hannah in the Kill Bill series. So I recommend it completely. Also, fun fact, I had not read this. So previous to this, I had not read this, but I did go to Comic-Con for the first time this year. And I saw a character dressed up as, if you Google Lady Mechanika, and I'll try and put the picture up here, it's of the Clockwork Assassin, and she was dressed almost exactly the same, and I'll put the two pictures up so you can see it. But very, very cool. Very, very cool. Steampunk is very, very cool. So I do recommend this book. I recommend it for the artwork alone. If you have any questions or want to reach out, please let me know. I will leave Lady Mechanik, Joe Benitez's website in my info to this video. I will also leave a link to, if you like Lady Mechanika, if you read it and you like it, I would urge you to check out Joe Benitez's urban fantasy Wraithborn. It is also beautiful. And that link will be below. So thank you guys very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you and bye-bye.